for the remainder of the day sitting.
Government business, sir.
Government business is now the order of the day.
Order number 2, in the name of the Honourable Minister in the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs, to move the second reading of the Central Bank of Barbados Bill 2020.
Honourable Member for Christchurch East Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise this morning, sir, to pilot this debate to effectively, sir, repeal the existing Central Bank of Barbados Act. Very aware, sir, that just 20 years ago, and I say just, sir, I had the good fortune, sir, of graduating from the University of West Indies and having a conversation with the then Dean of the faculty, sir, about where I would see myself in the not too distant future. And as a result of that, sir, I was recommended from the Economics Department of the University of West Indies to the Central Bank, sir, to be the research officer for that year. Of course, sir, I was interviewed by the then director of research at the bank, as well as the chief economist, sir. And whereas one thought that you knew economics having graduated top of the class, when you find yourself, sir, in an interview which went very well, but was rigorous, as one would appreciate the central bank would require. The second interview, sir, was with the HR. And once I thought I had gotten over the first hurdle with respect to the core economic issues that were asked of me in that first interview, the second one, sir, was perhaps even more intense because the Central Bank of Barbados, sir, has always been that institution in this country that has been lifted up and seen, sir, as an institution of integrity, sir, as an institution where Barbadians ought to be able to trust the information and advice coming from that institution, sir, given that at that time, the institution that we knew as the Central Bank of Barbados served, sir, as a protector, as a guardian, if you like, sir, with respect to our way of life in Barbados. And so having gone through those two rigorous interviews, sir, my introduction to work at the Central Bank in September of 2000, sir, was quite intense. And it is only then, sir, that I started to realize that I knew very little about economics, having graduated at the top of the class, until you start to get into the meat, sir, and the substance of actually trying to understand how small open economies work, and certainly how we fit in the context of the global environment. And 20 years on, sir, I find myself in this place, bringing this bill before this chamber as part of a process where this government, sir, having come to office 2.5 years ago, found ourselves in a situation where the very institution, sir, that I would have to openly admit, sir, that I learned economics and its practice, found itself at the center, sir, of what could have potentially destabilized the Barbadian way of life, sir. And that, for me, sir, is a very powerful and emotional experience, because being the beneficiary, sir, of state-funded tertiary education, I know, sir, that without that support, I would not be here today, sir, to be able to do that which ordinary Barbadians have been able to do, sir, since our inception, certainly, sir, since our independence. And it is a very emotional moment for me, sir, because you would recall, sir, that not only did we come to office to try to stabilize the economy, but equally, sir, the future of this country with respect to the policy as it relates to tertiary education, sir, and allowing ordinary Barbadians, sir, whether you're from Peterkin, sir, or Pike Corner, or any part of this country, sir, to be able to aspire, to be able to give back to your country that which your country, sir, had invested in you. And so I stand here this morning, sir, very proud to be able to demonstrate to all Barbadians that this Barbados Labour Party government, sir, continues to be committed, sir, to ensuring that the people of this country ought not to ever, sir, feel as if they can lose hope, because our commitment, sir, to the development of our human capital, to the people, sir, of this country, is critical to ensuring that we can continue to lead in the world, sir, to lead globally, knowing that we have invested in the welfare as well as the well-being, sir, of all Barbadians. We came to office 2.5 years ago, sir, in a climate where we observed over the course of 5 years, of the previous 5 years, between 2013, sir, to 2018, an environment where the Central Bank of Barbados, which, as an economist, sir, one of the most trusted institutions, not just in Barbados, but in the region, and I dare say, sir, as a Barbadian, the Central Bank was, for a lot of people, that institution that they could trust and put their faith in, because when you put your monies into any financial institution, but for the most part, banks, sir, most Barbadians felt as if the Central Bank, sir, had their back. But over the course, or during the period, sir, 2013 to 2018, we observed some very disturbing trends developing where, for the first time, sir, the Central Bank started to make up, well, I shouldn't say the Central Bank, the head of the Central Bank started to make up his own surveys, undermining, sir, the very process of data collection and rigorous statistical analysis, sir, and then making it public, sir, as if to make light of the important work that certainly the Statistical Service, as well as other agencies of government, are responsible for the collection of data. Then we saw, sir, a situation where the previous governor of the Central Bank, stopped engaging with the press to release information, sir, in the timely fashion that ordinary Barbadians had come to expect, sir, of the leadership of that institution. Equally, sir, the Central Bank, during the last administration, engaged in what we refer to, sir, as monetary policy, which is its domain, that was counterintuitive, sir, to what its mandate was. And as we all know, as Bajans, sir, very easily what the mandate of the Central Bank is. And that is to maintain, sir, the parity of the Barbados dollar to the US dollar. And we all know, sir, that is 2-to-1. And therefore, the government, as well as the Central Bank, sir, both equally have an obligation, sir, to ensure that whether it is fiscal policy on the government side, sir, or monetary policy on the central bank side, that is important that those two sets of policies are consistent, sir, with respect to maintaining the peg of the Barbados dollar to the US dollar. It's a simple philosophy, sir, that we have taken as a country since the establishment, certainly, of the central bank in 1973. And we, therefore, come to this place this morning, sir, very, very aware that we have to ensure that there is trust, there is credibility, and certainly, sir, in the context of a central bank, credibility is perhaps the most important element, because credibility, in economic terms, sir, speaks to the level of investment that one could expect either externally to the local business climate, sir. And therefore, a central bank, sir, has to do whatever it has to do to ensure that it is credible. And to the extent that the actions of a central bank, sir, really determines whether people will get a job or not. Because the business environment, the investment climate, sir, are often determined through monetary policy. Whether banks lend, whether financial institutions lend to one another, what are the terms of those loans, sir, whether short-term or long-term. The management of the financial resources within the system, the financial system, sir. The stability of the financial system is critical, sir, critical to the operation of any economy. And therefore, a central bank, sir, has the responsibility as the entity who, in a real sense, sir, if a bank in this country, or any country for that matter, but if a bank, sir, found itself in trouble, it is the central bank whose responsibility it is to ensure that there is no systemic risk or contagion that can spread within the context of the financial system. And therefore, the operations of a central bank must be consistent, sir, with that very most basic and fundamental tenet. The reality is, sir, that banks sometimes fail. We have not had a bank failure in Barbados for some time, sir, and long may that remain so. But banks do fail from time to time, and it is the responsibility of a central bank, sir, to first and foremost ensure that depositors, sir, depositors are protected. And whilst we have a deposit insurance scheme in Barbados, the prudential regulation, sir, that a central bank operates under is critical to protecting, sir, first and foremost the depositors, but equally, sir, ensuring that there is stability within the context of the financial system. And therefore, the conduct, sir, of a central bank, and the credibility that goes with that conduct, sir, is a very critical cog within the context of how confidence, sir, evolves in an economy, whether it is confidence, sir, at the investor level, whether it is confidence at the business level, sir, or whether it is confidence, sir, at the consumer level. Because whether a consumer, sir, determines whether they will borrow to do a little renovation, sir, or borrow for a mortgage, or borrow, sir, to start a small business, sir, that is, for the most part, linked and driven to the level of confidence that they see in their being able to get some return on that investment, sir, down the road. Whether businesses are able to expand, sir, and grow their market share, sir, is determined for the most part by the confidence within the context of the financial system. whether banks and other financial institutions, sir, are able to lend comfortably, sir, understanding the risk with respect to those loans, equally, sir, determines confidence within the context of the economy. But all of this, sir, is predicated on a regulator, a central bank, being able to ensure that it is first and foremost, sir, monitoring the conduct of not just the financial system, but understanding, sir, what is required to be able to keep the monetary policy position in terms of, in our case, sir, the protecting of the peg, and being able to ensure that persons can execute their plans in order to further their objectives. And so when a central bank finds itself, sir, in the middle of discussions, when the conduct of a central bank finds itself in the contemplation of investment, then you know, sir, that you have an issue. You know that you have an issue. Because as a regulator, sir, as a lender of last resort, your interaction with the market, as we will say, sir, is pretty much, sir, more from the perspective of having to intervene to prevent something as opposed to intervention in order to support reckless spending on the part of a previous administration. And therefore, we observed between 2013, sir, and 2018, a series of downgrades of the credit quality of Barbados, which in part, sir, was supported by financing from the Central Bank of Barbados to the last government that saw our credit rating, sir, move from double B all the way down, sir, to triple C, which is quite extraordinary, because of both the fiscal and monetary policy that were being executed by the previous administration and by the then central bank, sir, that led to us losing, sir, significant amounts of foreign exchange, because the confidence, sir, the confidence was waning with respect to private investment. Confidence was waning with respect to investment from foreign direct sources, sir. And we came to office in order to reverse that. We started off, sir, very early on, very early on, by imposing on the Central Bank of Barbados clear restrictions with respect to the amount that they will be able to lend to government. And we didn't do it just because, sir, we wanted to be contrary to the previous administration, which we are, from a clear policy perspective. But it was done, sir, because that was what was required to ensure that we can maintain, sir, the ordinary lifestyle for Barbadians, so that persons can then start to see a turnaround with respect to the way that government conducted itself, and that we created a situation, sir, where investor confidence as well as business confidence, sir, can start to improve. Now, the importance of a central bank, sir, in all of this cannot be underscored enough, because, as I indicated, sir, the discipline of government and the discipline of a central bank to maintain its monetary posture in support of its mandate, sir, of maintaining the fixed exchange rate at 2-to-1 is absolutely important for every single economic agent, sir, in this country. Because as we go about our daily life, sir, whether we are in banking, whether we are a taxi man, sir, whether we are a vendor, sir, down Cheapside, whether we sell car parts, sir, no matter what it is we do as Barbadians, we do so as we go about doing our chosen profession, and we get good at what we do, sir, and we seek to get better and better at it, sir, year after year after year. All of that is done, sir, and executed on the assumption that the central bank, in a sense, sir, our goalkeeper, if you like, that our goalkeeper, sir, is not going to run out of the bars and try to become a striker when that is not his role. Because you will recall, sir, Rene Higuita from Colombia, sir, and how tragic those things turn out to be.
Came to a sudden end.
To a sudden end, sir. But the reality is, each of us as economic agents participate in this thing called the economy, sir, on the assumption that our goalkeeper is not going to get a rush of blood, sir, and start to try to do things that it ought not to be doing because it wants to serve some strange political or strange agenda with respect to supporting policy that you know, sir, will lead to an own goal. And therefore, this government has come to office to correct a number of things as it relates to the operations of the central bank. As we know, sir, institutions are made up of people. They're made up of managers, sir. And therefore, we have to ensure that the corporate governance as well as the internal management of all of our institutions, sir, all of our institutions are sufficiently strong that, one, it insulates the institution, sir, from any political interference. As you know, sir, the central bank has always prided itself on the independence, and long may that remain so, sir. But much more importantly, one cannot be so independent that you're detached from the reality of ordinary Barbadians. And therefore, the appreciation for why that independence is important in the context of the ability, sir, to understand the plight of ordinary Barbadians is absolutely critical in this small open economy called Barbados. And that, sir, above all else, is why we have come to this chamber today, sir, to deal with the legislative slide, sir, with respect to creating the framework with respect to reforming that process. But it is up to the people of the central bank, sir, who work there, who ultimately, sir, will determine through their actions whether they will live up to those ideals that the central bank has set for themselves. One of the things, sir, that I am very proud of the central bank, and it is a written and unwritten rule all at the same time, sir. And it is enforced very fiercely, because from the inception of the formation of the bank, sir, under Sir Courtney Blackman, sir, one of the very, very clear rules was that there was to be no hiring, sir, of family members within the context of the central bank. Now, sir, one would appreciate that in a banking environment where money is involved, why this would be important. Because the ability for persons to execute their tasks dispassionately required, sir, in those early days, the assurance that there will be no familial relations that could potentially, sir, create any issues within the context of the operation of the bank. And this, sir, has been one of the strong features within the context of the operations of the bank. And it has remained so, sir, up until now. And that, sir, is one of the very, very important characteristics that has allowed the staff of the central bank, sir, to build up experience over the last 40 plus years, sir, in terms of being able to ensure that the credibility of that institution can remain intact such that there would be no, if you like, sir, scandals with respect to the involvement of family members. Now, I will say this, sir, that as you know with institutions, one cannot determine who you love. And the only exception to that rule, sir, is where persons may have gotten married within the context of the institution. But of course, what that then means, sir, is that you can't be working in either the operational side together. And therefore, the bank has a very strong internal mechanism, sir, to protect itself from that which other institutions may have found themselves in. And I believe, sir, that as we look at the reform of a number of our other institutions as well, that this is perhaps something that we need to revisit to ensure that through our hiring practices, that we ensure that we give these institutions, sir, not just the central bank, but that we give institutions the best possible chance, sir, to ensure that we do not compromise inadvertently the ability of the institutions to function simply because, sir, you may be my cousin or I may be your nephew, and therefore, within that context, the management of the institutions may become compromised because of such situations. I know, sir, that in a small open economy, it is difficult because everybody knows somebody either from school or church, sir, or whatever association that we may have. But I believe, sir, I believe that this is the one thing that the central bank, sir, has gotten right over the years and continues to be so. And I believe that if we can replicate this very simple thing across institutions, that we would have done, sir, a very good thing for ensuring that there is credibility with respect to hiring practices. And I genuinely believe, sir, I genuinely believe that it will alleviate some of the management issues, the internal management issues with respect to a number of our institutions. But, sir, today, this bill seeks to resolve a number of key governance issues that we recognize as a government needed to be sorted. And it is important to understand, sir, that in a COVID-19 environment, why it is even more critical that the central bank is repurposed and repositioned, sir, in order to respond to the needs of Barbadians. And whilst for the average person, sir, the average person in Barbados, they may be watching this thing trying to figure out why it is that the Parliament is now discussing a central bank bill, given all that is happening, sir, in the country and certainly in the context of the global economy. And the reality is, sir, is that as we have gone through, just yesterday, sir, we celebrated our 54th year of independence. Our reality now, sir, as we move forward and try to transform every aspect, sir, of how we do things in Barbados, the central bank, as strong an institution as it was, equally now, sir, has to look at itself to determine how best can it serve the interests, sir, of ordinary Barbadians going forward, especially, sir, given the significant fallout that we have all experienced in this COVID-19 pandemic. And therefore, to whom much is given, sir, certainly much is expected. And therefore, our philosophy, sir, is that there can be no excuse with respect to, from a legislative perspective, sir, any inability for the central bank to position itself, to modernize, sir, as we have asked every single institution to do, sir, and there will be a series of other reforms which will be rolled out very soon, sir, with respect to dealing with a number of issues as it relates to banking in this country. And I know, sir, that we have had a number of complaints over the years with respect to the level of customer service that a number of Barbadians have experienced within the context of the commercial banking sector. But the reality is this, sir. When the central bank was established, sir, coming out of the currency union with the Eastern Caribbean, sir, in 1973, Barbados was still, sir, just coming out of a few years earlier of independence, building its institutions, sir, and therefore what was required of the central bank then, sir, by way of prudential management, being the regulator, sir, was critical for the development of Barbados at that time. And therefore, the nature of banking, even the context in which persons engage in banking certainly was considerably different then, sir, compared to now. And therefore, as we move forward in the 21st, in this now, the third decade of the 21st century, sir, the central bank still has to ensure that the financial system remains stable. Because in a global environment, sir, where financial transactions are our ability, the country's ability to do business, a bank's ability, sir, to have correspondent banking relations in order for the person selling car parts, sir, to be able to get the parts from Japan, the manufacturer, sir, that needs to get some raw materials from India or wherever, sir, they need to be able to pay for those services, sir. When our fashion designers are placing, receive orders and they're exporting, sir, we need banking relations in order to be able to remit those monies back to Barbados. And therefore, the conditions, sir, under which we are operating today certainly are much more hostile, given all that we have seen with respect to the OECD, the EU, Financial Action Task Force, and all of the related activities around Know Your Customer, and all of these issues, sir, have converged to a point where ordinary Barbadians now are being asked every 2 years. You get a letter from your bank telling you that your information is out of date and you should renew this and renew that, sir. And it requires of us to change with the times. But with changing with the times, sir, it means that our institutions must invest, sir, in not just the personnel, but the technology to be able to ensure that we can keep pace, sir, with respect to the changing environment. And therefore, if we want Barbadian entrepreneurs and Barbadian businesses, sir, to expand and to grow, it means that we must put the various pieces of infrastructure in place in order to facilitate that. Which means, sir, that at the end of it, sir, we can only go and do what we have to do, sir, to grow our businesses or enterprises, sir, if we know and we are comfortable that the entities responsible, sir, for ensuring that we can actually do business are equally, sir, at the front line, are keeping pace, sir, with the level of dynamism, if you like, sir, that is taking place globally, and that they are essentially, sir, having our backs on the front line to allow us to go about our daily lives. And that is where we find ourselves today, sir, with respect to reforming a system. Because in the past, sir, we will open a bank account, we're going to put some money in it, sir, we withdraw, we might write some checks, sir, and we do our business in that traditional way, sir. Over the course of the last few years, we've seen the introduction of forms. If you had more than $10,000, sir, to deposit, as the money laundering rules came in. And the truth is, sir, that most Barbadians no, really, that when you really think about it, sir, if one go, before COVID, if you went to Oysters on Friday night, sir, you will see the roaring trade on Friday night. But those businesses then I didn't need night deposit, sir, would then have to submit a form saying, well, these are my earnings from the night's taking. Now, the reality, sir, none of those persons up there in Oysters, sir, on a Friday night engage in any money laundering. People come, whether tourists, Barbadians, sir, they come, they engage in their business. Everybody has a good time, but the reality is the level of accountability now required from ordinary people and ordinary businesses with respect to money laundering and all these other issues, which really and truly, sir, has absolutely nothing to do with the people in Oysters or any of the people in Swan Street, or for that matter, sir, who are on a daily basis just simply plying their trade. But $10,000, sir, is the threshold, and therefore it means that you have to tell the bank, sir, where you get this money from. And the truth is, sir, it creates a level of anxiety where there is not a level of communication. Now, here's the thing, sir. A number of these institutions have known these people for years, long before these money laundering requirements came up. But because people were coming in and just dropping in the money, sir, and everybody was lending and making the money, sir, nobody paid attention from a financial perspective and wanted to understand or to know their customers. It is only when the law said that you needed to do this that we've taken an approach which is kind of unlike us as Barbadians, sir. Now, if our financial institutions, sir, were actually serving their clients well, these issues with respect to money laundering and the way that it is being conducted would be very different. Because whilst we cannot say for certain, sir, what anybody is doing at any time, and we will not be naive to suggest that there may not be persons who may engage in money laundering, the reality is that most businesses in Barbados, most people in Barbados, sir, do not necessarily engage in money laundering. And therefore, whilst, as you know, sir, we are private people, we don't really like nobody know our business, and that is just how we are. There's nothing wrong about that. There's nothing sinister about that. That's just how we are, sir, as Barbadians. But the explanation, sir, around how to use this new mechanism, sir, to be able to do more business, I think is something that has been missing from the conversation, and therefore one of the key things with respect to the new central bank bill will be to ensure that we can create an environment, sir, that allows for us to raise the level of sensitization with respect to how do we turn these regulatory, this new regulatory framework into what is a competitive advantage, sir, with respect to how we as a country manage our affairs. And so the central bank, sir, has to be at the center of a number of critical reforms going forward. And as this government seeks to engage in the transformation of how we do business with citizens and how citizens do business with government, sir, the central bank, as the lead regulator of the financial system, sir, equally has to transform itself in order to ensure that we can adequately provide, sir, for a number of critical reforms that will, we believe, sir, lead to the unlocking of economic growth in this economy. What am I speaking about, sir? It is our intention, sir, to, over the course of the next 2 years, if not sooner, sir, to eliminate, sir, the issuance of checks, certainly from government. We've already started, sir. Because you would appreciate, sir, that when I write you a check at a government department, sir, somebody has to come and collect that check. But before somebody comes to collect that check, sir, the Treasury Department has to ensure that there's money in the account for the specific entity to print those checks. Then the messenger, sir, got to come and collect the check to take to the department, sir. The department then has to call you, sir, to tell you that the check is ready. You then have to send somebody, sir, to collect the check, who will then take it to the bank, sir, to deposit the check. It may take 3 days, sir, for the money to clear because the check crossed. And all of that time, sir, all of that effort is multiplied, sir, thousands of times across government. But not just government, sir, even between the private sector. This thing is happening, sir, at an alarming rate. And the cost, sir, the cost, meaning the time spent for people, sir, to do that activity as opposed to something productive, is what now we have to focus on shifting the mind, sir. And therefore, as we seek to roll out the new national payment system, which will come before this chamber, sir, in short order, to digitize the way that we do things so that our processes for payment, sir, which obviously, sir, is predicated on ensuring that persons can have access to bank accounts or credit union accounts, sir, that they operate within a system, sir, that if, sir, and I swear, when I get to the point where I can use my phone, sir, to buy my coconut water on Sunday, sir, I will be a very happy man. Because it will mean, sir, that we have penetrated and provided a level of financial inclusion, sir, which is important in this country. And we need to get to that point, sir, and the central bank is a critical institution for unlocking, sir, a lot of that pent-up capacity within our system. Simply put, sir, we have too many people, when the day comes, sir, running around, moving checks, moving money, trying to determine whether payments going through, sir, because of the number of people involved in that process, which when you really think about it, sir, whilst these people are hired to do that specific job, that is not really adding anything new to the output in terms of the economy. And therefore, for our businesses, employers, sir, what we want to be able to do is to pivot now, sir, and redirect those resources to something that is much more productive in the context of your business. In relation to government, it means that persons who are relying on government either for some benefit payment, whether you're providing a service to government, sir, there will be greater certainty so that we can transfer, sir, directly into your bank account. But the central bank has to be geared, sir, to facilitate, sir, that upgrading of the technology that would allow for us to be able to get to a place where we build an ecosystem, sir, that through your mobile phone, sir, you can pay anybody in Barbados or even outside of Barbados. And that is one of the critical reforms, sir, that this central bank now has to lead in order to ensure that we can truly bring more people into the financial system such that people can actually, sir, do business with ease. It is not a fait accompli, sir. It requires a lot of work, a lot of coordination with all of the financial institutions. But equally, sir, I say to the business community, sir, that whilst government is leading the charge with respect to the modernization of payments, private sector businesses equally, sir, along with the financial institutions, we must encourage, sir, all of our customers, all of our clients, sir, ordinary Barbadians, to get on board. Because this is a change, sir, that I believe will be significant and will create opportunities, sir, for real economic growth in this country. And we in this government are committed, sir, to unlocking those avenues for growth that is inclusive, sir, and therefore the provision of payment services, the provision of banking and other financial services, sir, will be a critical component in terms of how that is delivered to people to ensure that persons can conduct their business, sir, with respect to whatever it is that they wish to engage in. Now, sir, in addition to that, when it comes to credit reporting, sir, which is again one of those very critical cogs for doing business and the business environment. As you know, sir, when we came to office, we established the Trust Loan Program, sir, as a mechanism to allow for small businesses to be able to build up a credit history such that they can then go to any financial institution, sir, and borrow monies, 25,000, 30,000, 50,000, whatever it is, sir, with confidence, because the financial institutions would be in a position to assess the credit history, and therefore help to close, sir, the access to finance gap, which has been long-standing for small businesses, a long-standing issue, sir, not just in Barbados but across the Caribbean. And as we seek to bring a new regime within the context of credit reporting, because it is important, sir, and as we know, sir, Barbadians, generally speaking across the board, sir, pay their bills, they pay their loans. As with everything, sir, there are always a few, as we would say, sir, a few who are somewhat delinquent. But generally speaking, sir, most Barbadians, most businesses pay their bills, and they do so on time. Obviously, COVID notwithstanding and the current situation, Barbadians, generally speaking, sir, pay their bills. And therefore, that feature with respect to how we deal with credit reporting and unlocking access to credit for not just businesses, but certainly entrepreneurs and individuals will be a critical responsibility that the central bank equally, sir, in the next year will have to roll out with respect to being able to fully, sir, put Barbados on a path with respect to being able to get back to a level of respectability, not just to rise in the indexer with respect to doing business, but it is really about changing the way that Barbadians do business, not just with government, but do business with each other, how businesses relate, sir, to each other. B2B is the jargon that is used, sir. And equally, even peer-to-peer lending, sir, is one of those things that we now have to address in a very frontal way very early in 2021. But the central bank, sir, will have an extraordinary set of responsibilities to move Barbados, sir, from where we are today to where we want to be, as the Prime Minister says, world class in 7 years. And therefore, as we seek to put the building blocks in place, this particular central bank bill, sir, that is before the chamber today we see as a critical piece within that puzzle in order to build out the capacity for Barbados to become world class. Now, let me say, sir, that you will note that in the bill, the tenure of the central bank of the central bank governor, sir, is now proposed to be 6 years. And we have done that deliberately, sir, to, in a sense, move away from what may have been observed in the past with respect to any notion of the governor as I recall, sir, let me say it before I finish that statement. I recall a very famous statement from Sir Courtney, sir, when he articulated that the governor of the central bank is a creature of the Minister of Finance. And as a central banker, sir, and I still regard myself as a central banker, and the minister with some responsibility for finance, it is an interesting statement, because I absolutely believe, sir, in one, the independence between the two, and that independence, sir, comes with understanding what my job is and what the job of the governor happens to be. And therefore, in a small open economy, as I said, sir, whilst independence is critical, independence must be exercised in the context of how the society is being managed, and therefore, no man is an island. However, the new provision of the bill, sir, gives the tenure for the central bank governor for 6 years, and the central bank governor obviously is eligible for reappointment. We have changed the tenure with respect to the directors, sir, and we will have some transitionary provisions with respect to being able to ensure that at any given time that there's always continuity, sir, with respect to the board of directors of the Central Bank of Barbados. As you are aware, sir, for most institutions, whenever there is a change in government, directors generally put their instruments at the disposal of the minister, and therefore that practice, sir, there's nothing that will stop a director in the future from putting their instruments before the minister. But what we have sought to do, sir, is to further insulate the bank by appointing directors, sir, on a staggered basis, such that there's always continuity with respect to the management of the board. There's an executive committee, sir, which is comprised of the governor as well as the two deputy governors, sir, which are responsible, sir, clearly for the operational side of the bank. In our discussions with respect to with the stakeholders, it was important to establish the difference between the board and the executive committee by way of ensuring that there is daylight between the determination of monetary policy, which falls within the purview of the executive committee, as opposed to the board itself, where the director of finance sits as a member on the board of directors. And whilst this was indeed the case and practice before, as I knew it, sir, in the context of the determination of monetary policy in the past, we have determined that we will have that specific structure in place to ensure that there is sufficient daylight between the fiscal policy of government, since the Director of Finance represents the government on the board, but that the monetary policy, sir, will be, and all those operational decisions in terms of the central bank will be obviously done within the context of the executive committee of the board. And so what we have sought to do today, sir, is really to strengthen the governance of the board, of the central bank, to have operational autonomy, whilst at the same time, sir, maintaining the level of accountability that we want to be able to assure the public that the bank and its officials, sir, including the governor, will have a responsibility, obviously, to the whole of Barbados, but that there are mechanisms, sir, in place to ensure that a minister of finance can't get up one morning and determine that they will get rid of the governor of the central bank. And so we have introduced, sir, a concept of a double veto, where in the event in the future that a situation may arise where a governor may have to be relieved of his responsibility, that the Minister of Finance makes a recommendation, sir, to the head of state, Governor General, at this time, with respect to being able to do so, and therefore that provision now is in place to create a little more protection with respect to the governor of the central bank and that from the Minister of Finance. Now, I'm very careful with my words, sir, because it is important for the public to appreciate that by giving more independence, and we thought long and hard about this simply because we could not conceive, sir, of a scenario where it would have been difficult, sir, if the previous governor of the central bank was in place when we came to office, given his recent public publications, as well as actions, sir, would have seen him totally in conflict with the government's policy with respect to bringing discipline to the public finances. And therefore, we felt it was important that only where, sir, situations of absolute incompetence, sir, arose, that even if that happened, we still needed to have some level of further due process, if you like, with respect to being able to ensure that the process can be followed in a much more accountable way, such that we have that double veto within the context of the bill to ensure that there is, one, protection for the governor, but equally, sir, that within the context of the minister responsible for finance, that there has to be good reason why you relieve a governor of the central bank of his duties. And the reality for that, Mr. Speaker, is that the removal of a governor of the central bank in the context of any economy is a significant market mover. And therefore, if one is to inspire confidence in the conduct of whether it's your monetary policy or fiscal policy, sir, that those decisions cannot be taken lightly, and therefore, even in the context of the government now, when it comes to accountability, that the government equally has to be accountable, or the minister responsible for finance, sir, equally has to be accountable for relieving the governor of the central bank of his duties, and that is being now sought, sir, to be done through the head of state, as opposed to you just call one morning and say that you're gone. And that, sir, we believe is one of the fundamental improvements of this bill, to ensure that we bring greater accountability to the process and allow governors to render advice. As you know, sir, advice does not always have to be taken in part or in full, but to allow officials to know that they can do their jobs without feeling as if they're under pressure, sir, to follow a particular line of march from a future government or Ministry of Finance, sir, that may find itself on the wrong side of the public policy process. Now, one of the key things, sir, which I must address before I close is, you would recall, sir, that the bank, having printed $50 million a month, sir, to support the payment of wages in the public sector, sir, for a significant period between 2013 and 2018, sir. When we came to office, held over $2 billion, sir, in treasury bills, which is something that, to be quite honest, sir, is I don't have any here on my head, but if I did, sir, it would be it would be raised right now. But when I think about it, sir, and the discipline that attended the central bank in the past, as well as the government, because when we left office in 2008, sir, the central bank did not hold a piece of government paper. If they did, it was probably at the end of 2007, 20 million, but they normally dispose of those very quickly. So it was never a habit, sir. It was never a habit in my professional experience for the central bank to be holding government securities. As a matter of fact, sir, the central bank generally will make profits and remit to government, and obviously government was much more disciplined when I was practicing central banker. And when we came to office, the central bank had on its books, sir, $2 billion approximately in treasury bills. Quite extraordinary. And therefore, no matter how you look at it, sir, the bank was at the center, literally, sir, holding the bag, if you like, for the absolute, sir, indiscipline when it came to the public finances by the last administration. And as a result of the debt restructuring, sir, we had to make decisions related to that stock of debt, which then, sir, as you would know, if you were holding such a large set of securities, it means that the interest payments that you were getting, sir, would have been substantial. And therefore, we had to write off a significant part of that debt, which certainly, from a solvency perspective, sir, would have left a hole in the balance sheet of the central bank. And we did so, sir, not because we wanted to be callous, but to ensure that we can put Barbados back on a path with respect to fiscal discipline, so that we can resolve a number of other matters in the economy with respect to the payment of arrears, sir, the settling of refunds for a number of Barbadians, sir. A number of companies were providing services to the government and weren't being paid, sir. And we've had to put, as we would say, sir, wrong things right in relation to that. And so, in that context, because debt normally has ranks higher, sir, within the context of the obligations, it meant that because the central bank was holding such a large proportion of the public debt outstanding for any single institution, and when you think about it, sir, outside of the national insurance scheme, which by definition, sir, has to hold securities for the long term to ensure that the pensions of Barbadians are paid, there's no reason at all for the central bank to be holding such a large amount of debt, of government debt, on its books. And so the debt restructuring was undertaken, sir, given that, one, there was no rationale for the bank to be reasonably holding such a large quantum of debt. The result is that the bank will need to be recapitalized. There is the section here that speaks to the recapitalization is quite clear. We have been in discussion, sir, with the International Monetary Fund in terms of a plan for recapitalization. As I speak, sir, over the course of the last 2 weeks, we have been engaged in a technical assistance mission, sir, with respect to coming to a resolution with respect to how the central bank could potentially be recapitalized. But further information on that, sir, will come at the appropriate time. But as you would appreciate, in this environment, sir, whilst it is important for the central bank to be seen as solvent, and it should be solvent, sir, given that it is at the apex of the financial system. The reality is that when we did the debt restructuring, we ensured that there was a stream of income that would allow the central bank, from an operational perspective, to still be profitable. So whilst the capital of the bank has to be resolved, when we did the debt restructuring, we did put in place a stream of income coming out of that, such that the bank will still be profitable with respect to its operations. It means then, Mr. Speaker, that a lot more discipline is now being applied to the management of the central bank and its resources, in the same way that the government has had to be disciplined with respect to the management of our fiscal situation. And therefore, as we would say, sir, if you know, when we were growing up, sir, and we started to feel as if we were young men and women, sir, and your parents will often give you that look when you felt you was a man. And the point I'm making, sir, is that sometimes a good scolding is required to remind us that it is okay to want to be independent, but you can't be independent in here, as we would say, sir, in good old Bajan parlance. And therefore, as government, as the parent, sir, if you like, we have had to be disciplined. The central bank, equally, sir, will have to be disciplined with respect to its operations, because as we have indicated, whilst we agree with the independence of the bank, it cannot be in isolation, sir, as of what is happening in the wider society with respect to the economic situation. And so, sir, this bill before the House today, as I said, is intended to deal clearly with the improvement of the operations and the accountability, sir, with respect to how the central bank manages itself. I've already indicated a lot of the work that now has to be done, that the central bank will be at the center of playing its part to ensure that the wider financial system now, sir, is literally engaged to allow Barbados to grow and grow faster in the third decade of the 21st century, to be able to assist ordinary Barbadians with respect to being able to do business easier and allow for an environment where not just the payment system, sir, will deliver what we believe will be greater financial inclusion, but equally, sir, to be able to leverage the fact that through a credible and rigorous credit reporting system, that the oversight of that system would equally unlock resources with respect to a number of small businesses, entrepreneurs, and allowing for what we believe would be a greater level of economic activity in terms of unlocking growth and access to credit with respect to being able to allow businesses to grow in a much more sustained way, such as we come out of this COVID-19 environment. As usual, sir, all of the other issues related to conflicts of interest have to be declared with respect to the bank. All of the pension rights with respect to the staff have been preserved. We are in the process, sir, as I said earlier, of resolving the plan with respect to the recapitalization of the bank. Let me assure Barbadians, sir, that the relationship with government, and I think, sir, I will speak to that very quickly. The relationship with government, sir, is perhaps the most critical, the most critical update, sir, of that, because in the past, sir, as you know, the central bank has, by way of what we call the ways and means, sir, allowed for government to be able to borrow in the short term with respect to its normal operation. So under Part 9, sir, it speaks to the bank being the fiscal agent and the depository for government. All of these routine things will continue. The bank's mandate, sir, is still to ensure that we maintain the parity with the dollar. But at 62, sir, and I want to speak, clause 62, sir, speak to this specifically, which is the prohibition on monetary financing. And it speaks, sir, at clause 62, the bank, except otherwise provided in this act, shall not provide any direct or indirect financing to the government or government-owned enterprises, including the A, grant by the bank of direct or indirect loans or short-term advances, B, issuance or guarantees by the bank for financial transactions. And clause subsection 2 says subsection 1 does not apply to the banks that are owned by the government. 3, the bank shall not purchase securities issued by the government or any government-owned enterprise on the primary market. 4, notwithstanding subsection 3, the bank may acquire securities transferred to it by the government in accordance with section 7 and section 43. 5, notwithstanding subsection 3 and 4, whereby an enactment, it is declared that a public emergency has arisen in Barbados, the bank may purchase marketable securities issued by the government or any publicly owned institution on the primary market where, A, sir, the total amount of government debt acquired by the bank pursuant to this section does not exceed 3% of gross domestic product. B, securities issued pursuant to this section shall, 1, have a specified maturity of a maximum up to 5 years. 2, be issued at prevailing market rates. 3, to be repaid in cash only. And 4, not being rolled over or renewed. 6, sir, notwithstanding any other provision to the contrary, the bank may make temporary advances to the government to permit the government to manage its cash flow. This refers, sir, to the ways and means as I described earlier. 7, where the bank makes temporary advances pursuant to subsection 6, the temporary advances shall be subject to the following conditions. The total aggregate amount cannot exceed at any time 7.5% of the annual average of the ordinary revenue of the government for the 3 fiscal years of the government immediately preceding for which accounts are available. B, repayment in cash only within 3 months of the end of the financial year of the government. And C, bear interest at the prevailing market rate. Let me just state here, sir. In the past, our revenue forecast was predicated on having a good estimate of what GDP was. And certainly, sir, we observed that during the last administration, we saw an inflation, significantly so, of the GDP indicator, which then inflated the revenue target, sir, which was never realized, but it allowed the government to continue to borrow more, the 10% of the revenue projection, because the GDP was inflated, and that allowed, on the one hand, the government to access more resources from the bank than they would ordinarily have. What we have done here, sir, is to ensure that was, and not to blow our own trumpet, sir, but was we have been very rigorous with respect to our data and forecasting. I can't say that that will always be the case in the future, and therefore we have determined that the better way to deal with this and to have more discipline is to ensure that the revenue, upon which the Ways and Means will be determined will be the 3 years prior, which is actual data, as opposed to some notional or fictional forecasts, which the last administration sought to take clear advantage of. Section 8, sir, where subsection 5 is invoked and the ordinary revenue of the government declines below that in the fiscal year of the government immediately preceding the public emergency, the bank may exclude such reduced revenue in the computation of the annual average in Part A and subsection 7. And just for clarity, sir, because we are in the middle of a pandemic this year, which obviously would have reduced the revenue of government for this year, we are saying that under normal circumstances, the level of the revenue would not have been impacted in a significant way, and therefore in order to respond to clearly what will be more resources required, that the computation of this year's revenue, because of the pandemic, would by mathematically, would bring down the average, and therefore we did not want that to be a part of the operations going forward, and therefore at any point in the future, whether it is a pandemic or a hurricane or any other extraneous factor that could potentially reduce the revenue for a particular year, that those extraordinary years, sir, will not be a part of any computation with respect to the revenue, and therefore the amount that the bank can lend. 9, sir, notwithstanding subsection 6 and 7, the bank may make advances to the government upon terms to which the bank and the government agree in respect of the following: A, subscriptions and other payments that result from or are incidental to the membership and participation of Barbados in an international financial institution. B, participation of Barbados in transactions and operations it undertakes in respect of an international financial institution. And 10, sir, says subsection 7 shall not come into force until the beginning of the fiscal year of the government immediately following the day this act comes into operations. And so, sir, we have sought here to further strengthen what we had already done when we came to office in May of 2018. You would recall, sir, that we had reduced the Ways and Means from 10% to 7.5, as well as we had introduced the cap of 10% of the securities for which the central bank could hold, which was 10% of expenditure, was the maximum that they can hold. And so this section, sir, the prohibition on monetary financing and the provision for the bank to only lend in extraordinary circumstances, sir, up to 3% of GDP. This provision, sir, will by nature repeal the section within the public finance management, sir, which spoke to the 10% of expenditure with respect to the lending for government. And this, sir, Mr. Lending to government, the holding of government securities under the Public Finance Management Act. And so this will ordinarily repeal that section. And so, sir, we are confident that with the proper management, sir, of the public finances, and that with the good governance that ought to accompany that at the central bank, that these are measures that the public, sir, and the ordinary Barbadians who are going out their business, sir, ordinary business people, ordinary investors, sir, when they look at the conduct of Barbados will then be in a position to have greater confidence with respect to the operations of how not just the government, but equally how the central bank fits into this process. And so, sir, these, I believe, are critical. The relationship between the bank as well as the government, clearly spelled out here with respect to the operations of both institutions. In the past, sir, and we are working to get back to that as soon as possible, where normal service resumed, as we used to say, sir, as we would see on CBC when we were growing up. The point is, the discipline of government in concert with the Central Bank of Barbados is critical for all Barbadians to be able to go about their lives and to conduct their business. And this process, which we've started on under the Barbados Economic Recovery and Transformation Program, sir, is not yet complete. This bill is, as I said, one of the puzzle pieces with respect to being able to help to turn the governance structures around, not just at the central bank, but certainly its relationship with the government of Barbados. Having engaged a number of the stakeholders on this matter, we are satisfied that we can start to resolve certainly the capital issues, and this framework, we believe, sir, will go a long way to boosting confidence across the rest of the economy. Section 77, sir, speaks to the transitional provisions, and that just lays out very clearly, sir, how the directors will be appointed within the context of this transition period. Again, sir, all of this is predicated on the fact that when governments change, it ordinarily leads to a total change in the board. We deliberately, when we came to office, sir, determined that we will keep board members, and this is not only just related to the central bank, we determined that we will keep board members from the previous boards to ensure that there's continuity within the context of the operation of these entities. And therefore, these transitional provisions, sir, are intended to be able to help transition how we will appoint directors to the board of the central bank. And so when the existing terms come to an end, these transitional provisions here, sir, in subsection 2B, just lays out exactly how we will be able to appoint the tenure for the directors, and then obviously normal service, if you like, sir, will resume thereafter. And so, sir, these, the consequential amendments are the schedule, and this, we believe, sir, is a critical cog in terms of how we will change the landscape with respect to not just the operations of the bank, but how the bank will transform itself, sir, with respect to being able to better serve the public of Barbados. And with those few words, sir, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Honourable Member St. Michael West.
Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate the presentation for the honourable member from Christchurch East Central on this bill. My own position, humbly, I would suggest, is that majority of the time was spent giving essentially philosophy about the role of the central bank in the life of the economy of the country, which is important, but far less time spent with reference to the actual stipulations in the bill, which are of critical importance and which I think reflect very much on many of the concerns that Barbadians have today with respect to how the Central Bank of Barbados functions, and in fact, how other of our major institutions function, particularly so institutions such as the National Insurance Scheme. Now, the honourable member, I think from the notes I made here while he spoke, said his speech in this frame. He saw the central bank, he spoke of the central bank in terms of its relationship to government, central bank in terms of regulation of its own conduct, central bank in relation to the market, the economy in which that entity exists, especially so with reference to matters of investment and institutional issues as well. Now, that is a broad frame. I have questions and issues with reference to some of the specifics around those matters. Now, he did make some reference to some of the details in the bill. Did not come on section 63, which I want to raise, because that has to do with relationship between the central bank and the principles of the central bank, PALS, the principles of the central bank, and the government, particularly so the Minister of Finance. And section 63 speaks with reference to orders. The minister consults with the bank on macroeconomic policies of the bank. And the minister is of the view that the macroeconomic policies of the bank are not adequate for or conducive to the achievement of the purposes of the bank as set out in 6162. The minister may issue an order to the bank that states a macroeconomic policy is to be adopted by the bank in respect of those purposes. That's fine. Where the minister issues an order in accordance with subsection 1, the order shall, A, acknowledge that the government is responsible for macroeconomic policy, B, published in the official gazette forthwith. Notwithstanding section 2, the minister shall inform the bank of the macroeconomic policy, and B, as soon as is practicable after he informs the bank of that macroeconomic policy, cause it to be laid before Parliament. A copy of the order determining policy, which shall be subject to an affirmative resolution of Parliament, and to his statements and statements of the bank which occasion the order. Upon the fulfillment of the conditions set out in subsections 2 and 3, the bank shall give effect to the macro policy pursuant to the order. Now, we understand that government is responsible for the management, ultimately, of the affairs of this country. We do understand that specific and very important rules are ascribed to the Central Bank of Barbados as stipulated in the Act. We are concerned about the tensions which have arisen in the past and which may arise going forward with respect to how that relationship in practical terms work, where the government of the day is ultimately responsible, but where there's some independence of function with respect to Section 6 under the Central Bank Act here. Now, according to what I read in 63, those tensions may cause us to come to a place where the minister has to instruct the bank in very clear terms. We are responsible for the government of this country with respect to these matters, and this is the macroeconomic policy that we've determined this country should follow. The bank does not adhere to that policy and is brought ultimately here and laid in the Parliament of Barbados. And then the bank is further instructed that this is confirmed to be the policy. What happens then, Mr. Speaker? What happens then? Because in reality, these tensions will continue to exist. And it seems to me that when we get to that point, maybe we're back at section 25 in the bill before us today. And the honourable member, when he spoke, did make reference to section 25. And that has to do with removal of a governor of the central bank and other principles of the central bank. And he talked about a double veto. And I guess you understood that to which he referred. But if we look at section 25, especially when you get down to clause 2, Notwithstanding paragraph F of subsection 1, no person shall remain a governor where the Governor General, on recommendation of the minister, finds that he is unfit or otherwise incapable of carrying out his duties. Now, we are running up against a situation where the bill before us, if passed in this House, will provide that a governor of the central bank is appointed to a 6-year tenure in the first place, and that is, as has been stated by the last speaker, to avoid the appearance of political interference in the process of appointments or the change in the leadership of the central bank for political reasons at the change of the political cycle. Now, you want to avoid that, but you still have here a situation where a 6-year tenure is assured with the privilege of further appointment. But if the governor is at odds with the policies stipulated by the Minister of Finance, as is in section 63 indicated after that entire process, I would assume that 25 was suggesting to me that he or she may be removed on the recommendation of that minister to the Governor General, so long as the Governor General finds that that person, he or she, is unfit to serve in that capacity and for that particular reason. Now, we have in existence today, and will have for at least, or at most, if the voice of government is to be heard, believed, understood, and believed, we have at most 1 year left for the construct we know as the Governor General. We do not know beyond that year what the construct of the head of state of Barbados, in fact, will be. It may very well turn out to be that he or she, who is the head of state of Barbados, at most a year from now, is in fact a living representation of the governing party of the day, whatever party that is. I'm simply saying that this legislation is pointing us in a direction around which there is some high degree of uncertainty, because you are not giving us legislation that is intended to serve us for the next 11 or 12 months, 10 months, 9 months, however long. You are giving us legislation that takes us beyond that point. And you're giving a significantly pivotal role to an embodiment over which there is obvious uncertainty today. And whereas you're trying on the one hand, you say, to avoid the appearance of political influence or over-influence or interference in the process of appointment, and hence a 6-year tenure, you're creating a situation where that person can be removed at the initiation of action by the minister responsible for that position, oversight of that position at the central bank. And you are involving an entity as head of state. I am talking in the not too distant future, a construct of which we are uncertain. It may very well be that we end up, therefore, with a head of state, not a Governor General, we go republic, but with a head of state, depending on how that construct emerges, a head of state who is a living representation of the party in office at this time or at that time. Maybe what I'm suggesting here to some people is a bit far-fetched, but I see it as a reality which is fairly immediate for us, because we're talking about the relationship between the head of the central bank and that relationship with the government, that government being the embodiment of the Minister of Finance. And we're talking about a particular process around removal of that person, which will involve a head of state, a construct which today we are uncertain as to what it will represent. I mean not to be in any way disrespectful to any office, but simply to say that that is something which for me bears a mention. The Honourable Member was quite strident in his chastisement of the former head of the central bank, and laid some serious assaults against that position and the person who occupied that position. And those voiced assaults are not new. We have heard some of them in the past, but I point only to the fact that as part of his presentation, they were repeated here today. And the Honourable Member seemed quite concerned about the unchecked discretion exercised by the former head of the central bank. Matter for debate, I suppose, depend on which side you stand, it depends on which school you come from. You may arrive at an opinion as to how far is too far when the central bank head, an independent entity, exercises a discretion. But of course, that discretion was underscored today by the Honourable Member as having been at odds with the mandate given at the time. And so we're seeking to correct that. We want to be sure that in an attempt to correct a situation of something which is undesirable, we do not go too far the other side. And that is always a problem, always a tension that we have to address, because we do not want functionaries in the public service, so to speak, to be able to so exercise discretion as to create a jeopardy for the interests of this, against the interests of the state, or to create a sort of a hostile environment existing between those who have been elected and appointed by the people to carry out specific functions and responsibilities. Those tensions sometimes could create the kind of stresses, create serious uncertainty. And that's why I say it depends on which side of the issue you stand upon as to whether or not a discretion exercised by a functionary appointed to such a position as this and in whose confidence and competence is reposed the responsibility for such weighty matter. How far does he or she go in the exercise of that discretion before a minister believes he or she has gone too far? And is the minister also not exercising a very subjective view when he or she expresses that opinion? And it seems to be at odds. So we hear unchecked discretion. There was a lack of serious transparency with respect to the operations of the institution, because you aren't speaking to the government anymore. You're speaking at the government or around the government or over the government. You aren't speaking to the people anymore. You aren't speaking to the media anymore. A lack of transparency, and we do not want that around the institutions of this country, especially those which are critical. Now, we will address that through this legislation, at least we seek to do with reference to the Central Bank of Barbados. But we still have, and they report pretty frequently, we have situations where the National Insurance Scheme, I believe you're very well and perhaps more intimately familiar with these things than I am. They report when it chooses, when it seems good to them, so to do. And we do not have properly audited financial reports coming to the Parliament of Barbados. I don't know when the last one has come from the National Insurance Scheme of Barbados. We've talked about that before. So the matter of transparency at the level of pivotal government institutions is one worthy of address, and is significantly so. But we can't, limit the effort to the matter of the central bank simply because in the past we have had a principal who has acted in a way that displeases us. We've got to look at this business of transparency about the institutional life of Barbados in a holistic way. And we've got to be transparent ourselves while we do so in an attempt to address that. And of course, the charge of ill-advised monetary policy on the part of the bank at the behest of the then administration. I think that was what was being clearly leveled as a charge or being suggested that the monetary policy of the bank at this time, one of its core responsibilities, was ill-advised and very much in concert with ill-advised policies on behalf of the last administration. Now, that is not my statement, and that's not my suggestion. I'm simply reflecting on what I think I heard said in the House today. But these are matters of importance that we have to look at in a holistic way. We can't simply relate them to a particular individual. It must be that the goal of what we seek to do is institutional strengthening and the advancement of the integrity of the entity, which is a subject of our discussion. It cannot be that we are responding in any subjective fashion to what we saw as the failures of any particular individual or even a particular administration. It has to be that our view is that the institution itself can benefit from improvement in these ways, and that is why we set out to do these things. The matter of trust and credibility, critical element, that was stated, and of course that is true, because we want to ensure that there's a good business investment, a good business climate, a good investment climate. The Honourable member mentioned that for sure. The protection of the interests of depositors in the financial institutions of Barbados, that was mentioned as one of the proper goals, or one of the goals which properly we need to seek as we seek to strengthen the Central Bank of Barbados as a pivotal institution. But I found it strange that that was just mentioned in passing, because what is happening to the interests, and I mean that in every possible way that you can imagine, what is happening to the interests of depositors within the functioning of the financial institutional environment around us today, Mr. Speaker, is something over which you are greatly concerned, I am sure. It is something over which I am concerned, because it seems as though people of Barbados have been left completely now at the mercies of the financial institutions, and that they do what they will, and they do it as whimsically as they will. It would seem, Mr. Speaker, and one wonders, what about the influencing role of entities such as the Central Bank of Barbados and the heavy hand of government which can be brought to bear sometimes on these matters. So you can't pass over the matter of the interests of depositors in this fleeting way, and simply say that part of the reason why we need to ensure that the institution of the Central Bank reflects integrity is because the interests of depositors within the system must be protected. I am talking about individual depositors. I talk about any reference to institutional deposits with the central bank or anything like that. The integrity of the financial system is to be maintained. But how does one weigh the integrity of the financial system, Mr. Speaker? Do we pat ourselves in the back and say we have not had any bank failures here in recent history? Do we pat ourselves on the back, on the backs and say there'll be no failed banks in recent memory, and therefore the integrity of the financial institutions that operate in this economy is intact? But there are other institutions which have failed, some very, very, very fresh in our memories, and some as a result of or because of actions of this very institution which we call the Parliament of Barbados. So we have had failure reflecting itself to the hurt and injury of people in Barbados. One may very well reflect on the whole matter of the restructuring of debt here in Barbados. Why was that necessary? And why was it necessary to go to the extent to which we went to address the situation? Is it because there was a lack of integrity in the system somewhere along the line that exposed Barbadian investors, even pensioners, to those kinds of jeopardy? So when we talk about the integrity in the financial system, we can't simply make reference to one institution down the road and how that institution is to be governed. The fact is, the financial systems around us principal pillars in our everyday lives. And we've got to make sure that when we talk about integrity, we are looking at that again in a holistic way and not simply in a piecemeal fashion trying to address some issues down at the Central Bank of Barbados. Instability in the market, and a lot of the times that instability is triggered by dynamics which occur externally to our environment. But again, as well, sometimes at home, that instability is triggered by the unwisdom that attends some of the fiscal and monetary policy that we seek to implement in this country. So these things have to be looked at. I am seeking to suggest, not in a piecemeal, one-shot fashion, but in a holistic way. We have got to make sure that the financial environment in which we operate is sound and is possessed of a high level of integrity such that the confidence, the trust, the credibility of which the Honourable Member spoke would become reality. People's lives depend on those dynamics. And then you know of cases, Mr. Speaker, and others of us know of cases where because of failures, unexpected happenings, exposure due to somebody's delinquency or failure, people have had to experience misery or worse, suddenly bring their misery to an end in some undesirable way or the other. So these things are very important. We are celebrating, Mr. Speaker, 54 years now, having attained 54 years as an independent nation. We're going into our 55th year. We've gone into our 55th year now. And Mr. Speaker, a nation, you know, matures as its people. A nation matures as its people mature. A nation matures as its institutions mature and as its culture evolves. And we've got to make sure that the institutions which serve this country are brought to a greater level of maturity. We can attempt cosmetic improvements to give the impression that improvements are real. I'm not suggesting that's the case. I'm saying that in many situations, that is what people are wont to do, address the cosmetics of the issue rather than the central and core issues around the business at hand. And in this case, the profile of the Central Bank of Barbados must, of course, change in response to the influence that comes out of the market. But that profile must also change to affect what goes on in the market. And if that is not the case, then the central bank is stagnating and is not maturing. And if you got institutions like the central bank, national insurance scheme, and stuff like that, which are stagnating, we can hardly boast of the nation maturing in a balanced way, because certainly its financial life is a pivotal part of its lifeblood structure. The Honourable Member mentioned a national payments system, and he referred to that in rather glowing ways, which I suppose might be understandable, to eliminate payment by checks because of the costs associated with that, because of the enormity of the bureaucracy, the challenges which that brings, which would be associated with that. So we want to eliminate that payment by checks system. Whenever I hear this, I understand it, but I'm also thinking of that non-tech age category of persons around us who don't want to hear anything so about that. Some of us are still privileged to have mothers who are alive. Some perhaps in here young enough to have grandmothers and grandparents who are alive, and some of those folks don't even want to hear anything with the notion of anything that has to do with technology and can't, don't want to be a part of something that they can't lay their hands on and feel and touch and all of that. So that is something that would have to be addressed, because we do have to walk this path of embracing the technology and making it work for us and making it easier to do business in Barbados. But that category of persons has also to be borne in mind. But Mr. Speaker, I mentioned that to say this, people are not so much concerned about payment by check as they are concerned about not getting paid. And you're with me on that, because I'm sure you ran into this in St. Michael's Central. And you're not being paid, and government is spending all of this money on all of these different people, and you are waiting on this and you're waiting on that, and you're not getting paid. So whereas there's a concern as to the relative backwardness of continuing old systems that we can improve by incorporating technology, there's a concern that we can't just walk past about people out there who are not being paid their due, whether it's their normal wages and salaries, whether it's some benefit that is accrued to them. And Mr. Speaker, these things are very topical today. And capital interests, private interests, both foreign and domestic, who can get away with it. Some of them seem to want to get away with it and then leave government holding the tab, so to speak. So the concern that I want to re-emphasize today, while I support this view, that we can move to this, while concerning the aversion of others to go there, we've got to be concerned today about people in this economy, in this society, who are not getting their just dues, whether it's severance or whatever, whether it's salaries or wages, who are not being paid and paid on time. And sometimes government is a guilty party in those transactions. So I really want to raise that. Now, the Honourable member spoke also of the large quantum of government debt that instruments held by the central bank at the time of the debt restructure. My concern, he did get onto this eventually, talk about recapitalization of the central bank. That has been raised from this position by this voice before. I think I heard even the governor of the central bank some months ago, after the restructure, raised the issue of capitalization of the central bank. Others have spoken about it, and I would have hoped that the Honourable Member of Christchurch East Shell would have taken a little bit more time. He came to the subject, but spoke about it only in vague generalizations, that we would treat to that, and we're working on that, and things to that effect. But I think that that is a concern. This is a part of the whole theme of the discussion today thus far. This is a premier, this is a principal institution in Barbados, the economy, the economic life of Barbados. But vague generalization on the business of recapitalization of the central bank. And I would have thought that government by now would have realized that the country waits to hear how that is to be gone about and how that is to be achieved. Now, the matter of forced financing of government recurrent expenditure by the central bank is undesirable practice. It's one of the charges that the now administration continues still at 30 months almost down the road to lay at the former administration. Now, I'm not here to dispute whether or not that charge against the former administration is true. That's not the point. I'm not getting into BLP, DLP politics. The point I am trying to point to is that it is an undesirable practice. Whenever it happens, under whatever administration it occurs, it is an undesirable practice. Now, I'll say this, and I hear some sniggering, I'll probably get some more, but that's par for the course. You know, I agree that's an undesirable practice, and that there was too much of that in recent times, where the central bank, almost out of a sense of force, was made to finance recurrent government expenditure. Now, I've made the point before, and I will repeat it, but I think the boss scheme the BOSS scheme introduced by this government, which has not found the enthusiastic support of which the government spoke. 95% of public servants wanted to buy into that. I think that's what we were told at the time. Almost everybody. I don't think that that support has been overwhelmingly forthcoming, I suppose, to the government's surprise. But I think that that BOSS scheme, I simply repeat it today, is just, may I use this phrase, euphemistic attempt. Maybe that's sort of use of the term, but you understand what I mean. It's a cosmetic, euphemistic attempt to get government to provide, to get the central bank to fund some of government's recurrent monthly expenditure, salaries and wages for public servants. And until they can show me otherwise, I will keep on believing that and saying that, or maybe until you can show me otherwise, Mr. Speaker, since you are in the bosom of their council at some points in time, maybe you can show me where that BOSS scheme is not an attempt to achieve the same thing in a less seeming offensive manner to the sensitivities of the public servants of...
Honourable,
Yes, sir.
Christchurch, East Central.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on a point of order because the honourable member is seeking to mislead this chamber. The Central Bank of Barbados serves as a clearinghouse to facilitate those bonds that public servants wish to sell onto the secondary market with respect to being able to get the cash that they need for their salaries. Let me just reiterate, sir, that since the BOSS scheme has come on, the BOSS bonds have been issued up until the end of October, sir, $18.7 million in BOSS bonds have been issued. Currently, sir, 5.1 million of those are still being held by public servants, and the remainder, sir, have all been sold onto the secondary market, which are now held by pensioners, pension schemes, credit unions, and a number of other institutional stakeholders, sir. So the assertion that the government is using central bank financing to pay public servants, sir, is entirely false, and I want the honourable member to desist from casting such aspersions, sir, on the government of Barbados. Thank you.
Honourable Michael West.
No, I have said to you, sir, and to the House, and I suppose to the public of Barbados, until they can persuade me otherwise, I will keep on believing and saying that he just failed to persuade me otherwise. And therefore I would repeat it, were I not of the view that to repeat it would be a waste of time. But we move on beyond that. There is a tension sometimes between the money requirements of the government and the inclination, the disposition of the average depositor in Barbados to put his or her money in the traditional banking system. That's again one of the conclusions which some people arrive with reference to policy in Barbados in the banking sector, which has to do with interest rates, etc. What am I trying to say? The view is held that very low interest rates persist in the traditional banking sector in Barbados today because the establishment, the official establishment, let me put it in stark, broad terms. A government wants to encourage its people to invest in government instruments of whatever the nature, as opposed to putting their money in the traditional banking sector. So you allow the banks to offer next to nothing in terms of interest rates to make government paper more appealing and more attractive. Now, that has happened elsewhere. I believe it's happened here. I believe it's in part the explanation for why interest rates on deposits in Barbados continue to be so low. Because the official position is government paper becomes more appealing to you, Mr. Speaker, if you can get a better interest on the government paper. Even as recently as the same debate around the BOST scheme, that was one of the critical points mentioned as to why you should take up these bonds, because you're getting next to nothing in the traditional banking sector. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm saying those tensions exist because the government needs money, the money. So it floats its instruments, encouraging depositors to go for a seemingly higher interest rate. Yes, as opposed to what the traditional banking sector will give. So we have to ask ourselves the question, why is it that the banking sector in Barbados today, with the loud voices of complaining Barbadians being raised through every possible public medium, why is it that this persists? Mr. Speaker, that's a question. And I'm saying if you're talking about integrity in your system, if you're talking about enhancing the functioning capacity of your prime institutions in the financial world of the Barbadian economy, then you cannot allow for persons to be taken advantage of in this way. Why is it that banks are allowed to come with all of these charges, offer the minimal possible rate of interest on deposits? And is it because on the official side of the equation, somebody wants government paper, instruments such as that, to become more attractive? Now, if that's the case, we need to say so. I believe if that's the case, it's a dereliction of duty on the part of the government. It is a sacrifice of the interests of taxpayers and voters in Barbados in the interests of other entities. Now, the Honourable member, when he spoke just now, talked about all these bonds being bought up on the secondary market. Now, that's a story in itself to be told, because of one of the concerns we had from the beginning. One of the concerns we had from the beginning, that those who acquire these bonds on secondary market will be those who have the capacity so to do, making themselves better off. And you're using the salaries of taxpayers to achieve that aim. Now, I really want to get in that discussion because it's going to raise my temperature level here. You understand what we're saying, Mr. Speaker? Don't get up and tell me that these things are being eaten up on the secondary market. The secondary market, you know, we came and told people, invest in these bonds. 5% interest is afford down the road just now. Much more they get in the bank. The story is now, is the secondary market. You identify the elements in the secondary market. You can come tell me credit unions, fine. I ain't applaud for that. But tell me about some of the other elements and some of the other individuals who are benefiting on the backs of taxpayers from acquisitions in that secondary market of which you speak. And so, Mr. Speaker, it cannot be the official position that we will allow interest rates in the traditional banking sector to fall to the floor to make government paper and other instruments more attractive. And you know well that the banks, the traditional banking sector, will compensate by raising other charges, which is exactly what is happening, Mr. Speaker. You know that very well. You know, as a case could be easily argued in any court, especially by someone as esteemed as yourself. I'm all for enshrining in law any stipulations, any mechanisms that guarantee the independence of the bank. That independence can't be unchecked, but that independence cannot be by means either of cosmetic arrangements, which still will allow Minister of Finance, by extension the government, to make the governor of the central bank a feeble creature of its wishes or of its policies. So the nature of the appointments may involve the political process, but the performance of its functions should be protected from that political coercion. I'm simply saying there's a tension between the two. You've got to come down somewhere. And the balanced position is make sure that the appointments process is as free as possible of political influence. And when it comes to performance, make sure that it is not that the governor or the principals of the central bank are made subject to coercion from those whose agenda is primarily or principally a political one. I think that with respect to the central bank, respect to some other premier institutions, especially financial institutions, other institutions as well, we've got to make sure that there's a broad-based system of appointment, broad-based mechanism of appointments for senior officials. We've changed, Mr. Speaker, as you well know, the process for appointment of people, Judicial Appointments Commission, I think that's what it was called. And that's an improvement on what we had. But if you look at that in objective and dispassionate terms, you will still see that it leaves the system open to political influence. Political interference. We've got to find a way of balancing these things such that we get the best out of our institutions and we get the best out of our functionaries in those institutions, while at the same time providing the best situation for the government to effect public policy in the interest of Barbadians. Now, that is really where I come down. There's excess liquidity in the banking system. And maybe this was not the occasion, but the honorable member didn't address this. Excess liquidity in the banking system is a big problem in Barbados. I've heard the government, I've heard the Honourable Prime Minister many times make reference to that and how that money should be used for investment here in Barbados, and that people with the means should access that funding to get growth in the Barbadian economy. But there's excess liquidity in the banks. There's a reflection of our lack of growth. Now, Mr. Speaker, this will not be taken easy by the ears that hear it. But the excess liquidity in the banking system, which was pre-May 24th, 2018, still exists today. It still exists today. And it is indicative of a lack of growth or growth impetus in the Barbadian economy. And I say again, for the umph time, if umph may be properly recorded in our records, I say again, Mr. Speaker, I say again, the government can't be simply about boasting about foreign reserves increase, debt restructuring success, these things. We have to be talking about growth. And as long as there's an absence of impetus for growth, and this is pre-COVID, COVID's made it worse. As long as there's impetus for growth, you will have that situation of liquidity in the banking system, Mr. Speaker. Government has to deal with that. As long as there's a wage stall operating across Barbados, a stall on wages, and in a context where the cost of living has gone up, in a context where certain taxes have gone up. As long as there's a stall on wages, Mr. Speaker, you're gonna have that liquidity in the banking system. Mr. Speaker, you don't earn enough. I'm not talking about you, sir. You don't fall into this category. If a person does not earn enough, you don't put yourself in debt that you can't repay. So liquidity in the banking system is reflective of lack of growth, a stall on wages in Barbados, even at the level of government. These are serious things. These are true things. Business failures, pre-COVID, during COVID. Bridgetown, I say again, was closing down before COVID, Mr. Speaker. You passed through there. Bridgetown was closing down before COVID came. Still closing down. There will be all this excess liquidity in the banking system because businesses are failing and closing, and people don't want to access that money. An increasing cost relative to property acquisition in Barbados, Mr. Speaker. Cost of property is going up. Fella can't afford that, not even going to attempt to borrow that, even if he can qualify for the loan. Get too much, there you got your repair. I'm saying that there is a convergence of factors operating in the Barbados economy that is dampening the appetite for credit from the banks, and therefore that excess liquidity will continue to exist. We have got to talk about the central bank's role in the life of the Barbadian economy being such that decisions are taken in concert with government policy, decisions are taken that will so stimulate those factors in those dynamics in the banking system such that people will feel that they should make ready access to the banks. But it must also be policies that create the environment that people can earn more, that people can find work. But it's not only unemployment, Mr. Speaker, did I mention that? It's underemployment as well, chronic underemployment in Barbados. So you don't have a job. If you had one before COVID, you don't have it now. Or if you had one, you're still holding on to it, you're not being paid enough, you're underemployed, chronic problem in Barbados. There will always be that situation of excess liquidity in the banking system. What is the role of the Central Bank of Barbados in trying to ensure that the climate in which we operate here with reference to the economy is such that businesses can thrive, that households can be brought to better well-being, that government policy can be so effective that they popularly, positively benefit people. These are the things I'm concerned about. I think that I shall stop there, Mr. Speaker. For now.
Honourable Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I beg to move the suspension of the sitting until 2 p.m.
The question is that this honourable chairman be suspended until 2 p.m. All those honourable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This honourable chairman stands suspended until 2 p.m.